Hey, everybody, welcome to the What's Up Solar Podcast. I'm doing something a little bit different here. Well, I brought in a really good friend of mine. Now, let me go through this. If you like the podcast or if you like the videos, go to YouTube at What's Up Pod and subscribe, share, like. If you like just listening in your car, you can go to Spotify, iTunes, and you see this beautiful banner in the back. If you're watching this, you'll notice you'll notice that this is the podcast you want because you'll see this banner. Download, share, just mark it so it'll automatically update. That way it really helps us out and it helps me to get content to you. On with the show. I have my good friend Kate Collardson. We've been traveling in each other's circles since NABCEP of like 2014 or something like that. And we've experienced some of the same issues in the industry in various times and sometimes together, which is kind of synchronous. But one big thing that changed this year as of my birthday, July 4th, was we had the introduction to the One Big Beautiful Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill changed how we thought about residential solar and solar in general in the United States. I wanted to bring Kate on because, and I hope to make this a thing, like get Kate's opinion.
Love it.
Oh, what's up with Kate? That's a good one. What's up with Kate?
Love it.
Because, we don't have diverging opinions, but we see it from two different perspectives. So somebody might be seeing it from the front of the glass, somebody might be seeing it from the back of the glass, but it's this clear liquid and we're still seeing the same liquid. So how you doing, Kate?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing better than I expected. I am doing way better than I expected. And that's how the universe works, because everybody knows me as a trainer. And that's what I'm going to do is I am going to impart knowledge upon the masses. But you've been in solar for over a decade and
20 years.
20 years. You've been in longer than me. Were you like 10 when you started?
No.
And you've been in Denver. Denver's been a place where solar was really thriving and promoted for, before some of the other parts of the country outside of California. And like with incentives like Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act, that helped reshape solar for the last couple of years. And everybody was betting on it. Now that's been taken away. What's your immediate thoughts on the impact of that?
Well, I've been personally impacted in that I was laid off, and that was a direct result of the One Big Beautiful Bill, or OB3, I've heard it referred to. I like it. So I found myself with my company that I was working for. The funding partner went under, and that meant that we had to go through a RIF, and unfortunately I was caught up in that RIF, and here I am today looking to find a new job, and it's difficult. I think that the industry, what I'm seeing personally is, while folks are hiring, a lot of the hiring is happening at at levels, like more entry level positions.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of opportunities that I'm finding at this moment around for folks with that would really benefit from the amount of experience I have in the industry.
I had that in another industry. I remember this interview I kept going on. Several interviews. This is long time ago, before I was in solar. And interviewers would say to me, you have too much experience for this job. I, I wasn't, I was like, huh? What? I don't get it. What they were, and one guy actually said it. He was like, you have too much experience, and I'm going to tell you why I'm afraid of hiring you. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, you'll be bored.
Mm. Yeah.
In my mind, I'm thinking, I just tightened my belt up one more notch. I don't care. I'm bored.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to be able to live my life. That's why we have hobbies.
Yes.
But that's a very American thing. I'm gonna tell you about when I was in Europe recently, and I kept seeing this train called the OBB. I kept thinking about the beautiful bill every time I saw the train. But, I do understand what you're saying in the fact that I decided to take all of this accumulated knowledge that I have gathered throughout this solar industry, and I asked this question to the universe and said, how can I be the most impactful? Because there are so many things that I know, and if I do it for one entity, there's a lot of information that is going to waste. So I set out on the journey of being able to work for people on a mutual term versus, hey, here's the term, come work for us.
Right. Right.
And it's been a challenge, but here's the thing I think about, like people who have been in the industry, I'd say 5 years. Because if you're in solar for 5 years, you're an OG.
That makes me a dinosaur.
That makes me like Methuselah. But I think because we got to a level of corporate stability where everything was very corporate, and you start to see the mon pa or the what I call the American shop start to dwindle. And I think we have to go back to that because with that corporate came a lot of expense. There's a lot of overhead to run a corporation with over 1,000 employees. I mean, just you got to make a certain level of money just to keep the doors open. But it's a little bit different when Kate and Emmitt start a solar company and we have two crews of people and we have this warehouse that's on Kate's family land.
Sure.
That's very different than, hey, I have a brick and mortar in 5 states and I have 10 crews running out of those and I have inventory I have to manage and I have safety I have to manage. That lends itself because I keep thinking about
To mention quality. And that's one of the big things about getting so big is that what can happen is quality can decrease. And so you do all of these installs, but they aren't as great. They won't last as long. They aren't as watertight. The connections aren't as strong or whatever it is.
Yeah, because it's a numbers game. They're just getting the numbers up and you do sacrifice some things. I know some companies they were installation companies, but they did more service after the installation to get it going, around PTO time for it to be viable. And then I've heard these stories, I don't have empirical proof, that there are installations that have never been commissioned, like not turned on. Like they're on the roof, sitting there, not turned on. Those things wouldn't happen. Well, they could happen with the ma and pa if they didn't have their finances correct. But these weren't ma and pa. These were corporate, large scale entities that were doing that. And I'm not saying that they are bad. I'm not saying that because they did so much good for the industry. I'm just saying these are some of the things that we run into when we deal with situations like this.
I'm being just to talk off of that real quick. That I see as an opportunity in our industry when things feel really bleak, especially for someone with as much residential experience as I have. I have spent most of my career doing almost exclusively residential work. And as these residential companies go under, those systems, like you said, there are some up on roofs that all they need is to be turned on. There are others that were working but may have failed, and there's no one out there. There are a few entities out there that are helping those system owners keep the systems working.
That you are correct. And I actually said this during a recent class, and I'd say within the last 6 months, I had some people who are still getting into the industry, and they said, I need to get a job. They're like, I'm saying, you want to get hired? They're like, yeah. I'm like, why don't you start where you're at? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, there are PV systems around here who people don't know what they do. They don't even know if they're turned on. They don't even know if they're working. There's leaves that are underneath them. There's critters that are munching on stuff. Just go service people's equipment. They're like, how do I do that? I'm like, it could be as simple as a Facebook ad. It could be, you don't even have to do that. Find an area with a lot of solar, put a thing up on the telephone pole. I'm like, go back to Grassroots. I'm like, if you get one call from a customer, it's highly probable they know somebody else with solar because these people kind of pull together. And they're going to say, hey, I had Jeffrey over here. He came over and our bill was a little weird and he found this little thing. I'm like, find an electrician friend. Just use the American way. This is what I call bootstrap. I come from Detroit. All we do is hustle.
That's right.
And we figure it out. But with that, it's not a young person's skill set. And what I mean by that, physically installing solar is a young person's job. And when I say young person, I mean you have to be really fit to install solar on a roof, residential particularly. Commercial, maybe not so much, but residential, you have to climb up ladders that may be 30, 40 feet, carrying a 60-pound sail that can catch the wind, be harnessed in, carrying tools. Then you have to work with your ankles at a pitch for hours at a time and have situational awareness. Having said that, most people, once they get over like 35, and there's a lot of people in this industry, are poised to do jobs that are not related to that. Some of the jobs that are available, what would you say they are? And I'm asking this because of where you came from. There's administrative stuff. There's other things. There's troubleshooting.
Absolutely. There's design work that needs to be done. There is the troubleshooting when something goes wrong. We need that tech support. There are jobs just kind of working between, being the liaison between the installing company and the AHJ or the utility. Just to say, hey, be the one who's doing all of that interconnection application, but also the permission to install at the location. Project management is a big one. Program management. There are lots of entities out there who are, just need somebody to shepherd the projects through all the stages to ensure that that nothing gets missed. That everything is complete when you get down to the commissioning of the system. And these are important roles that that, you don't have to be up on the roof for.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. We're coming, it feels like we're coming to the end of residential solar, but that's not true. And I'm going to tell you why. I live in Indiana. When I moved here, it was 9.7 cents a kilowatt hour. It is 16 and a half cents a kilowatt hour, heading toward possibly 19 cents a kilowatt hour. Where I live, and I say this over and over again, I went to Target yesterday. Actually, I went to the Target parking lot. I didn't go in Target. I saw so many Teslas, a few Rivians, a bunch of these electric, they look like motorcycles, but they're electric bikes with pedals on them. All those have to be charged. And you've moved from a very low cost per kilowatt hour to almost a doubling of the cost per kilowatt. But yet and still, people are opposed or abstinent to obtaining solar on their home in the Midwest. I don't get it. Do you think it's because of education, or the negative has been promoted far more than the positive?
We've gotten a lot of bad press over the the last few years. I think that's a given, and folks believe that. But I think it's also what I believe we'll see is that as those electricity prices continue to climb and the cost of solar stays the same, or even increases a tiny bit, it will make more and more sense for a homeowner to install solar. And when we talk about resilience and thinking of extreme weather events, things that cause the power to go out, then solar plus storage starts to make a lot more sense. And when you look at people in California where they have the rolling blackouts, and the folks with the solar and the storage sure are happy at the end of the day.
They're Netflixing and chilling.
And they're having party. Folks are coming over. Suddenly they're the most popular folks in the neighborhood because they got the lights on.
It's funny because I have to do a talk in Texas about virtual power plants. Texas is literally its own electrical grid system within the state. And during my research, I realized if every other home in the United States had battery backup on it, there are a lot of gas and coal plants that would not be required.
Right.
Literally, with virtual power plants, and for those of you who don't know, if you have a battery and solar on your home, that battery can communicate with the utility, and they can sequester energy for it and pay you for it, that energy that they use, instead of firing up a plant. Here's the other thing that I realized: they react so much faster than firing up a plant. Like, so much faster. And I'm just like, how come this is not at the forefront of our energy crisis? Because we recently had a town hall where I was at, and people were adamant about data center not being here. Mm. Everybody relies on ChatGPT and AI, but they don't want the engine that runs it in their backyard, but it's going to happen.
Gonna happen.
It's going to happen. With that, have you seen an increase in your energy rates in Denver?
A little bit. We have a co-op and a little bit, but it's not as dramatic as what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
But one interesting thing on the data center front, I was at a summit a couple of weeks ago, and we were discussing the negative press that we've gotten, how solar really is actually under attack in a way we haven't seen in my career, and the fact is that solar is the most rapidly dispatchable source of energy out there right now. We can deploy solar very quickly
Yeah.
in a way that we can't with other forms of electricity. If you look at, and this is, I wish I had these numbers correct, but I'm gonna go for it and say if you take the projected needs of data centers alone over
Oh,
the next 5 years, so 5 years, what we're going to need in data centers, you cut that into one third, and we need to something like quadruple the amount of electricity that we produce right now just to service one third of what's projected to be needed for data centers over the next 5 years. What other form of electricity can can be dispatched that quickly? How long
no,
does it
but,
take to build a nuclear plant? How long does it take to
yeah.
build a gas-fired power
I
plant?
mean, it takes a while. So what you could probably, if you got your salt together, you could put a megawatt site up in about 6, 8 months. And that's I think and that's throwing in like, we'll get to it, or it's cold outside, or blah 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 blah. Versus the alternatives, which are gas. You got to get foundation. You got to get a bunch of things. But here's the big thing, and I was thinking about this as you were speaking. I was recently in Paris, and I had this epiphany all of a sudden as I'm traveling through Europe. All the major cities are on big rivers.
Mhm.
I'm like, why is that? That's because they could generate power from the water.
I mean, that's I would argue that's a secondary reason that that probably trade came
I
first.
mean, yeah, trade, but you could trade, but you can, okay, some grain comes down the river. What are you going to do with it? Oh, we're going to use
Right.
the river
It's a good point.
to do
Yep.
this.
Yep.
So it's a tandem thing. We're in that modern age now where this is the new river. Solar is the new river. So there are places, especially in the major cities. I know this coming from Detroit. Detroit was decimated as far as real estate.
Mm.
Put solar on those. I won't even go that far. Don't even put solar there. Every parking lot of every strip mall, every Target, I mean, every parking lot in America, if you just put solar on that, you got gigawatts of solar that provide shade in the summertime.
Mhm.
They provide cover so you can walk safely without slipping so much for getting wet in the wintertime. They provide infrastructure and power for those properties that are there. Oh,
And
hey,
you're not using any land.
no.
Zero land need. You don't have to, if people are saying I don't want to use the farmland for solar, we can, that's a whole separate podcast we
Yeah.
can talk
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
but
we'll get to that agrivoltaics. Yeah.
but it like it's all right there. All of this space is right there. Let's use it. And instead of what's happening now with all of those parking lots is we're creating these heat islands and contributing to the warming of the planet. Well, let's cover them with solar and produce some
Wait,
electricity.
you say they're heat because is it because they're mostly blacktop and they absorb the heat?
Yeah, exactly. The thermal mass. So throughout the day, they absorb all the heat, and then at night they contain it, and it slowly dissipates. But this is these the roads, the parking lots, all of this thermal mass around all of our cities are that is absolutely uh, contributing to the warming. And you can go, gosh, I was driving in I want to say Tucson, which is obviously it's hot in Tucson,
Very.
but you leave the city and the temperature drops by like 5 degrees on your car thermometer, and that has to do with the thermal mass that you're
I
just not
never
around it.
thought about it that way, but I always realized when I ventured into Chicago, it just felt hot in the summertime. Like, and then in the wintertime, it feels cooler.
Interesting. Yeah.
because you're shaded. You're in the you got these like
Mhm.
especially downtown Chicago. It's
Yeah.
just
It's just cold.
oh yeah. But what can all right? Whip out your my magic wand. Bing. What would you do? What would be the solution to revamp this? Let me throw something in there.
Go for it.
America or United States, we pay far more cost per watt than other countries do. For instance, my brother-in-law in Austria, he got an 11 kW system with a battery, and it cost him 24,000 euros. Yeah, I see your eyebrows. That's with a
Wow.
battery.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Wow.
24,000. I explained to him, this would be easily 50 to 80K. And he was like,
Exactly.
nah, we do, yeah. He's like, nah, that's not happening here. That's one of the biggest things. And I was saying to a friend of mine who works at SunGrow, it's like our cost per watt is too much. He was like, it's mostly, I know I'm diverging from my question.
Oh, that's fine.
He said, it's mostly labor. I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, you got the door knockers who are making like 1,500 to 2 grand.
Yep. And then you've got dealer fees.
That's what I told him about. I'm like, dealer fees can be like 5 grand. I'm like, you're almost at like 10 grand before something's been put down on the roof. Somebody has to pay for that. I
Yes.
was like, so that $3 a watt that you're saying it costs to install this for residential, I'm like, it could, if you think about it naturally, if you took what you needed, if everybody took just what they needed, it could be $1.75 a watt. We might be able to get it low as if we really were diligent about it, we could get it down to $1.50. And I was like, that's not including the interest you pay on it.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I forgot my original question.
Well, it's your magic wand question.
Yeah, what could you do?
What can we do as an industry? I think that if I had a magic wand, I would stop the attacks. I, I would get the government back behind us in a way that and I'm not here to tout uh the incentives that we've had, the tax credits. Listen,
Yeah.
I started installing before we had the 30% tax credit. It was capped at $2,000 when I started installing, and we were selling at $9 a watt.
Oh,
And the way that the incentives were structured, the idea was that as the cost of solar equipment and labor and all that, as the cost comes down, the incentives also decrease, and so at the end you're sitting at about the same and that you pay out of pocket. And I want to clarify that the $9 a watt we were selling at, $3.50 came back from the utility.
ah,
And so it kind of worked its way out, but even today we're a lot less than we were with that $3.50 and the
yeah,
$2,000 from the government.
yeah.
And so I think that we have grown as an industry before incentives. And we can, as an industry, do okay without them. Now, I like to say we're better than oil and gas. We don't need those incentives like they do.
But which I don't understand because if you've ever seen this movie with Billy Bob Thornton, Landman,
Oh, I've watched that show.
he says some truths in there.
He does.
He's like, you cannot get rid of petroleum. Everything you touch is related to petroleum, from your plastic bag to your car door to your spoon is touched by petroleum. All well and good. Then they should be making enough money off of that because they have so many derivative products that they shouldn't need those incentives. Unlike technology that's newer on the block, which is solar, wind, so forth, so on. You would think that that would be the promotion because here's the one thing that I've seen is the fallout of jobs. Young people don't, that was an avenue for if you didn't want to go to college, if you weren't the college type, if you didn't keep good notes or had the study skills, whatever. Some people, a lot of people are not built for college, but they're built to work. They're built to have a mentorship where somebody says, hey, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then you're going to do it. And then I'm going to teach you along the way. That's what solar was. Solar offered jobs, and I'm going to rattle them off as many as I can. Installer is the first thing that you see. But to support the installer who puts the modules on the roof, you need an electrician. Then you need a parts person so that they can count all the conduit, the modules, the racking, the Wagos that go, the nuts and bolts, all those things. So you have a warehouse person. Then you have a controller or purchaser for said stuff, making sure you have the right stuff. Then you have trainers like myself and like you who have to train you how to install because newer products are coming in. We haven't even gotten to the manufacturers yet. Then you have the permitting people, the scheduling people, the operations in general, the people who, this people, administrative assistants. I was going to say secretary, but that's just not right anymore. But all these jobs have been kind of taken off of the table or at least diminished to a heavy degree. And that's just mildly. Think about you're in Denver. How many solar schools are there or learning centers?
Oh, not even anymore. I don't know.
But there were.
There were, yes. We had a Ecotech and then of course Solar Energy International is in Colorado, but it's not in the on the Front Range.
Yeah. A
A couple
workforce de
community colleges here and there.
yeah, workforce development programs that are providing things for uh sustainability for nonprofit centers. So there are some places that are not only food deserts, but they're energy deserts as well. All this stuff is being kind of ripped off, like swept off the table little by little. But I think it's going to turn around, and I'm going to tell you why.
Please do.
In 2026, I think in the spring, everyone's going to have an epiphany. Like, we were too greedy. We need to figure out a way to make this happen with a nice profit margin, with a decent profit margin that helps the cause. Because if you think about it that way, if you sold solar differently and not through as a get as much as you can and make financial instruments that make sense for everyone for the long term, done deal. Because the dealer fees have to come way down. Instead of paying door knockers by the deal, you pay them an hourly wage,
Mhm.
call it done.
Yes.
I know door knockers, you're going to be pissed at me, but my son's a door knocker.
Oh, is he?
And yeah, he's living the life. He's like, I love this. I was like, you're 18, you would. But I think we're going to have this epiphany because that's a lot of infrastructure to take off to just sweep it. And the other thing, I'm ranting now, is most people did not have a tax liability. And people are like, what does that have to do? If you don't have a tax liability, for instance, let's say me and my household of like four, we don't have a tax liability. We have kids, we have write-offs, yada, yada, yada. So quite often we get a few bucks back from the government. A liability is when you owe the government. When you get solar, they don't issue you a check if you own the system. So if I have a loan, I get solar. If I have a liability, I can take a third of that I use for installing the solar off my tax liability. I don't. What I believe happened with the PPAs is that the companies own that, which companies typically have a liability. So they're just racking up these where they could get something. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong.
That is, I mean, that's the vehicle right there. That's why it makes sense for the big companies, the financiers, is because they're racking up those credits and taking advantage of them.
That's a lot. I was just thinking about Chicago, how many installs they were doing a day off of a PPA. They were doing like 40 a day. And these systems were costing 40 grand. So a third, what was it, 30%
Hmm.
of 40 grand? Or was it 26% of 40 grand?
Oh, right. Yep.
Still, it's a sizable chunk of change at the end of the year
Mhm.
that you can go, hey, we wrote all this off. Our profits or shareholders are happy as all get out.
Right.
Anywho, so what would you say to somebody who's thinking about solar right now? Like at the beginning of the year, they were like, they were a young person. They were like, I want to do solar. I want to get into this renewable. What would you say to them?
Well, I think that the first thing that I say to folks who are interested in joining the industry is get some training. There are great opportunities out there. Solar Energy International, I mentioned before, is one, but there are great options on things like heat spring, and
MREA.
MREA. Emmitt has some great training. Uh, and I do think that it's important to come in these days with some kind of background. And then I recommend looking at the local companies, the mom and pop shops, as you have called them, are good places to find an entry level role that can get you some great experience, and that's where I started. I was at a small company. I was up on the roof for years, but then I learned how to design, and then I learned CAD, and I started drawing the permit docs, and then I was running permits, and so it was one of those situations where you learn a little bit, and then you take that knowledge and you grow a little bit and you learn some more, and you continue that cycle of learning and growing. And that's my recommendation. Start with a little bit of training, and then find that entry level position at a local shop.
Okay, I can only ask you this question.
Hmm.
What would you say to a woman who wants to get into solar?
I would say all of the things I just said, but I would also say that you have to believe in yourself, and just know that even though um, uh, other folks on the job site might have a problem with you being there. They might not want to talk to you. They'd rather talk to the male colleagues. It's important to know your own worth, and to keep putting yourself out there, and you'll gain the experience, and you'll feel better and better about yourself, and feel more comfortable pushing against that dude who's like, I don't want to talk to you. I'd rather talk to your colleague over there because he looks a little more him than you do.
And I hate to say that, but I've seen that.
Oh, so have I. Yeah.
And I mean, in recent years,
Mhm.
I've seen that, and it creates a really poor atmosphere because I know some really capable people, male and female, who will just run ragged through anybody. With that, all right, I'm going to end this conversation because I don't want to get too long in the tooth, but I'm going to pose for another session of What's Up with Kate because you can probably provide some insight. In the year March of 2020, we experienced a shutdown. Our world changed then. Back in 2020, which was 5 years ago, there were people who were 12, 13, 14, 15 through 19 who are now adults and entering the job market. I have children and I've seen it firsthand. You have children, you've seen it firsthand. So on the next one, let's talk about how COVID and the shutdown impacted the workforce.
All right. That's an interesting topic. I'll look forward to that.
All right. So thank you, Kate, for being on
Thanks
What's
for
Up
having
with
me.
Kate.
That was awesome. Thank you.
So people, remember, like, share, subscribe. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm going to say it one more time. Like, share, subscribe. Now, we are talking about the solar PV industry. When I was in Europe, they were like, we don't call it solar. We call it PV, photovoltaic. I was like, yeah, rightfully so. But Americans, we put slang on everything. Just remember one thing. What you don't know may cost you money. Slapping these things on your roof, that's what they call it. Hey, we're slapping modules today. When you have them in your life, it's going to guarantee you something down the road, especially if it's all paid for. The sun will never send you a bill. Remember that. Till next time, love y'all. Peace.